My name is Margaret Dawson. I'm 68 years old, a widow, and I've been living alone in a modest 2-bedroom house in a small town in upstate New York. For the past few years, I've worked part-time as a janitor at an office building downtown. The job isn't glamorous, but it helps me keep the lights on and the bills paid most of the time. This past Thanksgiving, my son Daniel came to visit. He's my only child, 35 years old, and wildly successful. He owns a tech consulting company based in Boston and flies around the country managing clients and expansion projects. I hadn't seen him in 4 months, but I'd been counting down the days. I spent the entire morning cooking. Roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing from scratch, everything Daniel loved when he was a boy. The kitchen was a mess of steam and spices, but I didn't mind. I was excited, maybe too excited. It had been a hard year. When Daniel walked through my front door, he looked like he stepped out of a magazine. His shoes, his coat, even the watch on his wrist, all expensive. Behind him was his wife, Vanessa, elegant as always in a cream coat and perfectly styled hair. They brought the scent of wealth with them, and for a moment I felt like my humble home might collapse under the weight of it. We sat down at the table, shared stories, laughed a little. Daniel talked about his company's latest expansion plans. Vanessa mentioned a recent trip to Europe. I nodded along, though a part of me felt like I was listening to someone else's life. Then, as I was serving pumpkin pie, Daniel leaned back in his chair and said, casually, "Mom, I've been meaning to ask, how's the lake house? Are you enjoying it?" I stopped mid-motion, the pie server still in my hand. "The lake house?" I asked. He smiled. "Yeah, the one I gave you for your birthday 2 years ago, right on Lake Willoughby. You always said you loved being near the water." I stared at him, stunned. I never received a lake house, Daniel." The smile vanished from his face. "What do you mean? I had the deed transferred. I've been sending you money for maintenance every month." And just like that, everything changed. I could barely sleep that night. After Daniel and Vanessa left early, and in awkward silence I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold, replaying the conversation over and over again. A lake house. Monthly payments. A birthday gift I never received. For 2 years I'd been living paycheck to paycheck. My janitor salary barely covered the basics. I'd been skipping meals to afford my blood pressure medication, wearing the same winter coat year after year, and washing my clothes at the laundromat, only when absolutely necessary. I thought I was just unlucky, that everyone had to tighten their belts after retirement. I told myself I was strong, that I could manage. But now, that quiet suffering felt less like a necessity and more like a cruel joke. I remembered the winter 2 years ago when my furnace broke down. I couldn't afford to fix it, so I spent a month sleeping in sweaters under layers of blankets. The same winter Daniel thought I was living in a lake house. It was around that time Vanessa had started calling more often. She asked a lot of questions: how I was managing, if I needed help, if I considered downsizing. I thought it was her way of connecting, of trying to fill the void left after my husband passed. I was grateful, even flattered. Now I wondered what she was really after. Daniel had always been a good son, but since marrying Vanessa his calls had grown shorter and more formal. He'd always been busy, but I understood. He was building a future, and I didn't want to be a burden. If he wasn't checking in on the money, or the house, it wasn't out of neglect, it was trust. He trusted Vanessa. The next morning I opened my old file drawer and pulled out everything I had: tax returns, bank statements, birthday cards, anything that might help make sense of the past 2 years. But there was no mention of a property transfer, no sudden deposits in my account, nothing that pointed to a gift from Daniel. Just bills, and receipts, and reminders of how hard I'd been trying to survive. The thought of Daniel believing he had been helping me all along broke something in me. He hadn't failed me. I hadn't failed myself. Someone else had taken everything meant for me, and done it so quietly, so deliberately, that I hadn't even known. For 2 years I thought I was invisible. In reality I was being watched, and someone had made sure I stayed exactly where I was, struggling, silent, and unaware. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about betrayal. Daniel called the next morning. His voice sounded different, tight, anxious, like he hadn't slept either. "Mom, I went through my records last night," he said. "Everything's there. The deed, the payments, the transfer confirmation. I even have the email chain with my assistant. It all went through. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved. It meant he hadn't just made it up. He had meant to take care of me. But another part of me felt sick. "So where did it all go?" I asked softly. He was quiet for a moment. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." By that evening, Daniel was at my house again without Vanessa. He sat at the same kitchen table where we'd had Thanksgiving dinner just 2 days before, spreading out documents from his briefcase like it was a business negotiation. Bank transfers, deed copies, property tax receipts, all showing that I was the listed owner of a house on Lake Willoughby and had been receiving $1,500 a month for the last 2 years. None of it made sense. He pointed to a scanned copy of the deed. "Here, your name, Margaret Dawson. The property was purchased under your name for your birthday 2 years ago. I had my assistant handle the details, but everything was supposed to be mailed to you." I shook my head. I never saw this, and I never got a single dollar. Daniel's brows furrowed. "And the address?" He pointed again. 847 Maple Street, apartment 2 billion. That's where all the documents were sent. I felt a chill go through me. I've lived at this same address for a decade, Daniel. I've never set foot on Maple Street. He leaned back, the color draining from his face. Something's wrong, really wrong. In that moment, both of us turned toward the door. We hadn't heard Vanessa come in, but there she was, standing just inside the doorway, her designer purse still slung over her shoulder, her face unreadable. "Everything okay?" she asked, too casually. Daniel didn't answer right away. His tone changed, no longer the soft-spoken son, but the sharp businessman I'd seen on television interviews. "Vanessa," he said carefully, "do you know anything about a property transfer, or a bank account with my mother's name attached?" Her eyes flickered. Just for a moment. But I saw it. That tiny hesitation. The kind of pause that people make when their mind races faster than their mouth. "No, of course not," she said quickly. "Why would I?" But the lie was already written across her face. I'd worked as a janitor for 15 years. I knew how to read people. I'd spent my life cleaning offices while executives spoke freely in front of me, assuming I wasn't paying attention. And I knew exactly what I was seeing now. Guilt. Deep, dangerous guilt. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank with Daniel by my side. My hands were trembling as I handed over my driver's license and social security card. The woman behind the desk typed silently, her eyes scanning the screen. "Ma'am," she said after a moment, "you've never been into this branch before, have you?" "No," I replied, "never in my life." She turned the monitor slightly so Daniel and I could see. The account was under my name, Margaret Dawson. It had been opened 2 years and 1 month ago, weeks before Daniel made the first transfer. The mailing address on the account, 847 Maple Street, apartment 2 billion. The listed phone number, not mine. And the signature on the account file, a version of my name I didn't recognize. The strokes were too sharp, the flow too different. "That's not how I sign," I said quietly. Daniel took a picture of the signature, then pulled up a photo of an old birthday card I'd written him. The difference was obvious. "She forged it," he muttered. "She actually forged your signature." "This is identity theft," the bank employee said. "You'll need to file a police report immediately." But we weren't done. Daniel had brought copies of all his financial records. As we sat there in the bank's customer service area, we started connecting dots. It wasn't just the $1,500 monthly payments. There were additional transfers. $500 for new glasses, $800 for dental work, $1,000 around Christmas. Every time Daniel thought I needed something, he'd sent more money. I never saw a penny. "How much?" I asked, my throat dry. Daniel did the math on his phone. $43,000, he said softly. Over 2 years. I couldn't speak. We left the bank and drove straight to 847 Maple Street. It was a crumbling apartment complex across town, the kind with peeling paint, flickering porch lights, and mailboxes hanging crooked on their hinges. Apartment 2 billion was empty. A faded for rent sign hung in the window. "She probably rented it just long enough to get mail and open the account," Daniel said, jaw clenched. I wasn't just angry anymore. I felt violated. Someone had built a version of me that wasn't real, a version that received gifts, cash, and attention, all while I worked night shifts just to afford groceries. "Daniel," I said, staring at the broken sidewalk, "how did she get my personal information? My social security number? My signature?" He didn't answer right away. Then his face darkened. "My home office," he said. "I keep copies of family documents there. Birth certificates, old forms, scanned IDs. She would have had access." It hit me then Vanessa hadn't just taken advantage of a situation. She had orchestrated it. While I sat across from her at family dinners, serving food with my worn hands, she'd been depositing checks under my name. She'd watched me struggle, listened to me talk about rationing medication, and said nothing. She knew. She always knew. Daniel's hands were gripping the steering wheel like he was trying not to fall apart. "I trusted her," he whispered. "I thought she loved me." I didn't know what to say, so I reached over and placed my hand on his. "She fooled us both," I said. "But not anymore." That evening, Daniel drove us to the lake house. I had never seen it before. As we pulled up the long gravel driveway, I gasped. It was stunning, single-story, wide-open layout with tall windows that overlooked a still, glassy lake. The sun was setting, and the sky was streaked with gold and lavender. This was what Daniel had given me. This peaceful, beautiful place, and I'd never stepped foot in it. Vanessa's father opened the front door. His expression shifted the moment he saw us. "Oh," he said quietly, "we've been expecting you." Vanessa appeared behind him, her face pale, her eyes puffy. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked small. "Margaret," she said, her voice thin. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her for a long time. This woman who'd eaten at my table, called me mom, hugged me at holidays, while stealing from me every single month. "Are you?" I asked. "Or are you just sorry you got caught?" She started crying. Real tears this time, but they did nothing for me. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said. "It started with just one payment. My parents were going to lose their house. My dad was sick. I needed help. I thought I'd pay it back. But things kept getting worse, and the money was just there." "You mean the money my son gave me?" I said coldly. Vanessa dropped her gaze. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she whispered. "You didn't mean to." Daniel's voice cracked. "My mother was rationing medication while you were buying plane tickets to Europe." Vanessa's composure began to crumble. "I was going to fix it," she said, desperate now. "I really was. I just needed more time." Daniel stepped back. "Pack your things," he said. "You're leaving tonight." Vanessa's eyes widened in panic. "Daniel, please don't do this. We can fix it. I'll get a job. I'll pay her back." "With what?" Daniel asked, voice icy. "You've never worked a day since we got married. Everything you own was paid for with money you stole from my mother." I watched her fall apart right there in the entryway, but I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just silence. The man I raised had finally drawn a line. And the woman who had crossed it could no longer pretend she hadn't. The following week, Daniel's lawyer, Mr. Patterson, came to visit me in person. He sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd cried alone for so many nights, and laid out a plan. "This isn't just a misunderstanding," he said gently. "This is fraud. Identity theft. Wire fraud. Tax fraud." I nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want the truth. I want my life back." Mr. Patterson assured me that we could pursue both civil and criminal actions. The house was legally in my name, even if the signature was forged. The bank account, the credit cards, the tax returns Vanessa had filed in my name, all of it would be investigated. Vanessa had dug herself into a deep hole, and it was finally caving in. Meanwhile, Daniel stayed by my side. He canceled business meetings, postponed flights, and spent his days collecting paperwork, contacting the IRS, and making phone calls. It was the most I'd seen of him in years. One morning he showed up with coffee and an envelope. Inside was a statement from the fake bank account. It listed every deposit, every withdrawal, every lie. "There's more than we thought," he said. "She didn't just take what I sent for you. She applied for credit cards under your name, took out a personal loan, even filed a tax return saying you'd made $20,000 in unreported income." I stared at the numbers, my heart sinking. The IRS thinks I've committed tax fraud? They're investigating, he admitted. But Patterson's on it. We'll clear your name. I felt numb. All this time I'd thought I was just poor, just forgotten. But I hadn't been forgotten, I'd been targeted. Vanessa had used my identity to create a second life. One where she got to play the generous daughter-in-law who coordinated everything, while secretly funneling everything meant for me into a life of comfort for herself and her family. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen my dignity, my security, my peace of mind. Eventually, law enforcement got involved. They froze the fraudulent accounts, issued subpoenas. Vanessa was arrested at her parents' house 3 weeks later. The mugshot didn't look like the woman I knew, it looked like someone caught in the act of losing everything. She pleaded guilty to identity theft, fraud, and multiple counts of financial abuse. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary ending. A month after the sentencing, I moved into the lake house. It felt strange at first, like I was walking into someone else's life. The furniture, though tasteful, wasn't mine. The walls were painted in colors I wouldn't have chosen. The garden outside had been well kept by hands that didn't belong to me. But it was mine now, legally, rightfully. Daniel insisted on helping me settle in. He hired a cleaning crew, a contractor to repaint the bedroom, even brought in a new recliner he said felt like something Mom would pick. Slowly, the house began to transform. The kitchen became a place where I actually wanted to cook again. The screened porch became my morning sanctuary. I'd sit there with coffee and listen to the wind ripple across the lake, a sound I'd never had the luxury to enjoy when I was racing between shifts and counting pennies. Daniel started visiting more often, too. Not out of guilt, but out of love. He'd stop by with pastries, take me to the grocery store, or just sit on the porch with me and talk about nothing. We were learning how to be mother and son again without the shadow of Vanessa between us. The community surprised me, too. At first, people were curious, some too curious. A few looked at me like I'd won the lottery, but most were kind. They brought casseroles, sent letters, and offered quiet words of support. I was no longer invisible. One afternoon, I called my former supervisor at the cleaning company. "Miss Henderson," I said, "I won't be coming back to work. I'm retiring." She was silent for a moment, then said, "You've earned it, Margaret. You've more than earned it." For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving, I was living. And it felt peaceful, not loud, not triumphant, just soft and steady, like a second chance that didn't need to shout to be heard. As I sat on the porch watching the sun melt into the water, I realized this wasn't just the end of a painful chapter. It was the beginning of something I'd thought I'd lost long ago. My life on my terms. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever experienced betrayal, silence, or had to rebuild your life from the ground up, you're not alone. Healing takes time. But peace, once found, is worth every step. What would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever trusted someone who broke your heart in a way you never expected? Leave a comment below, I read every one of them. And if this story touched you, please consider liking and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care of yourself.